how are you doing? So this series is based on Annie Proulx's 700 plus page novel, Barkskins, which covers over 300 years of time. Elwood, I wanted to ask you, I know it's probably tough to cover that much material, so how did you decide what you wanted to include and what you wanted to cut out of the original story? How did you go into this filming process?
I toyed with the idea at first. I was like, oh my God, could you do each season a different like decade or, century or something like that? But once I got the cast that I had, I was like, we have to tell a lot of story with this cast. And the first 100 pages in the book, and again, I'm a novelist, and I always think in any writing, in a short story, in a poem, in a book, that first bit is always the thesis statement of the writer, and it's where they spend the most time laboring over it. And I think it was particularly true in Annie's book. The characters jumped off the page. There was a vividness. There was a sense of immediacy. So once I decided to set that book in the first 100 pages, I just had to sort of blow up the plot and characters to fit that. But I knew right away that I wanted to spend time with this character named Claude Trepigny because he was such a weirdo. I was like, if I can get some version of this character on television, there's not been a character like him. So that was what was the challenge to me, was to get this character of Trepigny, which looms very large early in the book.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you, playing such a badass female woman who just really takes every man who comes into the inn by storm and is really a female empowerment character in the 1600s, which you probably don't see very often. Who did you turn to as an inspiration when taking on this role to play such a fearless woman in a time that women really didn't have any rights at all?
Elwood.
Elwood, yeah?
No.
He's a 6'9" big guy, muscular. I don't know how tall you are, Elwood. He's an Amazon, and he wrote that part of himself into her, which was really lucky for me. You have to think that any woman, no matter how rustic their environment, or even now in a great city, you're always going to be up against the power of the physicality of a guy who's bigger than you. And in this, when there was danger, and in this case, women just didn't have much power. So I thought about what she had lost and what she was trying to keep and gain, and it became clear to me that she had to be really canny and really powerful. And then Elwood wrote this line for her where she says, "I will club your balls into your belly." And I was like, okay, I pretty much know who she is. But also, can I just say I'm a New Yorker? Like I say that it sounds so cavalier, but there's this thing about living in New York. You just learned to walk down the street and sense behind you. You just learned how to be kind of tough in a way. And so I think I tried to keep some of that sensibility for her.
Well, I tailored it to Marcia because again, this goes back to the first conversation. Before she was cast, I'd written the first 2 scripts, and she called me up. Not only she had read the book, but she kept, and I'm a huge fan of Marcia's, and she kept saying to me, I want to get down and fucking dirty. I want to get down and dirty with this. And when you have an actor telling you that, that's like a challenge. So, I also knew the minute you see Marcia Gay Harden walk on screen, there's these certain expectations would come with her for previous work. And so my job as a writer was to slowly unpeel that onion. So I didn't want you to see her coming. She's the character I kept saying, you're not going to see her coming. But by the time you get to the middle episode, you go, oh, wow, she's really has this plan that she's been manipulating all along. I thought that was really important to the character. And Marcia was really patient with me. She kept going, when am I going to get to, do this? I kept saying, wait. I got to kill your husband first. I've got to do this. So it was this journey we went on together, but it's a synergy that happens with good actors. You want to write to them. And it happened immediately just from a phone call with Marcia. All of a sudden my conception of the character and what I wanted to do with it completely changed just talking to her. And it always happens.
Well, David, your character is very complex and interesting as well. Trepani and Marie's alliance kind of keeps both the French and the other communities safe from the mutual enemy. So now that the relationship, as we see it changes and things unfold, do you think that it'll affect the French's safety in the future? And will it affect his safety in the future? Because that was a choice that he kind of broke in the later episodes. So what do you think about that?
Well, it will affect the French safety. Well, I'm not sure he's thinking in those terms. I mean, he's a man who's got himself into a real mess. Is how I see it. He's not sure what he wants. He thinks what he wants is this beautiful French wife and this ideal of a family, to inherit his position and all his land. But he's fallen for. First, he ends up with Melisande, who isn't the woman I think he thought he was going to end up with, an enormously manipulative woman. But he's also in this situation with Marie, who is equally manipulative, and two very, very, very strong women who then start to battle each other in a very unpredictable way. And I see him as for all he's a strong character, he suddenly becomes very vulnerable, very weak, very lost. And I feel that by the end he's lost control. He doesn't really know where he's going. And I think if he had a plan, his plan has fallen apart at this stage.
And let me just ask you, Elwood, what does it mean to have National Geographic backing a fictional story that's never really been told on screen before?
Well, I mean, I have to say, when I was first brought to project, I said to myself, I was like, National Geographic, they don't do fictional programs, right?
Right.
But then I started to think about it. I was like, here's this amazing book by this author, and there's this opportunity to be the first. And I have to say, but National Geographic, every step of the way, supported. This is a weird show. This is a crazy show. They supported it 100%, far more than other places I've worked at that do lots of fictional shows. They were looking to, I think, and I'm just guessing what they were looking for. They were looking to break the mold. They were looking to shake people up. And I think this is how you do it. And they never once stopped me from doing anything I wanted to do. They encouraged me to go further and push. That's National Geographic. That's what you, as a writer, you're looking for those places, those outlets. And so I had complete freedom to do this crazy show. And everything I pitched, they were like, you want a crazy Cathar guy wandering around the woods talking about building a kingdom to God? Sure, go for it. You want an innkeep who's going to think she can rule the entire town? Go for it. They never once bounded me at all creatively. And that's just really exciting and a testimony to their bravery and just embracing, fictional narrative on their channel.
Well, I'm really excited to see how far it goes. I think we have another Game of Thrones situation on our hand where there's a lot of storylines and a lot of characters that people are going to be obsessed with. I think that's all the time I have, but thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to see what happens with you guys in the next season.
Thank you.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hi,
Hello.
good.
Hey.
You look fabulous.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah.
much. I'm trying. I was trying to get ready for it, although.
Dress from the waist up. Dress from the
Yes,
waist up.
right, exactly. Sweatpants on the bottom.
We got
Yeah.
shadows everywhere, and you're perfectly lit. And
Oh, you
Yeah.
know, you're making me feel really good about it. This is different for me for sure. I'm sure it's different for you guys as well, like being on Zoom to do a junket. But I will say that after watching this series, quarantine didn't seem so bad. Like I was
Thank you.
After watching this, after seeing what each of your characters went through, I was like, self-isolation, guys, is the least of our worries. There's murder, there's survival. Which of those themes really spoke to you personally, and why?
I think something to do with the vulnerability and the exposure of these people, and what it was to try to set up a such a remote settlement. It's really dealing with kind of the birth of the transplant of European civilization to North America, and really to all the reaches of the world. And it's an amazing time to be dealing with, because of the mentality of being within this walled fort, outside of which is nature, which represents horror, and a strange civilization that we can only see as, really basically heathens, and something to be got rid of. So within that kind of concentration, you also end up with these really extreme people, which just for us is a really enjoyable thing to be able to deal with creatively.
Totally. I feel like the series, in regards to survival, and also how people react to what that means and how their relationship to nature. I feel like it's, our series explores like the strikingly different reactions to a limitless forest, an inexhaustible forest, and how one either shapes themselves to the natural world or tries to dominate it. And I think the story of survival, of either dominating or, submitting to, like, I guess, giving yourself to the natural way. I think it's an interesting crossroad of a clash of cultures through the First Nation and the European colonists.
Sorry, Lily. When the stakes are that high as well, as an actor, when the stakes are that high, you I'm sure we're not any different to people from back then, but people were more direct, and all that kind of drama is great for actors. It's kind of like nourishing, and kind of, you can just kind of attack, get stuck in.
Totally.
Yeah, it really shows how humans are kind of very self-serving a lot of times, and will always kind of like justify their interests. Which character's story in Barkskins did you most rationalize or align with? Because you have characters that are super noble, like Renee, or even your character, David, but then you also have these savage characters who will do anything just to survive and get ahead. So which character for you guys did you really see yourself gravitating towards?
It's funny because you can't help but just say the character you play.
Just because it's so in your frontal,
It's not your job. It's not your job when you come to these things while you're in the midst of working to take a kind of moral position. In fact, it's absolutely essential that you don't. I think the show itself has a very strong moral conscience, and I think it's showing a total picture of something, from our perspective now, looking back on it, looking at where we're at as a society and as a culture. And I think that was definitely Annie Prue's intention in writing it, was to take a direct line from those actions then and the mentality that was going on then to now, because these are the times more than ever where human history accelerated its impact on the world and shaped the planet. But practically, while you are in there, it is really indulging, as like David was saying, you're just indulging the kind of extremity of these people, of
the circumstance,
of chewing into that, the particularity. And like in a family, you kind of like, everybody fits in their way of behaving kind of in contrast to one another. And I think you see a huge spectrum of humanity between all these characters. Whether it's the Wendat, the Iroquois, or Gomes and his choices, the movement of the Hudson Bay Company. It's extreme in its contrasts.
For me, I'm like, take me to the First Nation village. I feel like the way that our show depicts it, and the way that these people, and hearing these languages, I'm just like, it feels so rich and raw. So if I'm just gonna choose a lifestyle and out of the two civilizations,
I agree with Thomas about your own character, but when I watched it, between the difference between working on it and watching, when I watch it, I'm kind of drawn to the mad poetic Trepanier. You know, I kind of just loved.
Oh,
he was
totally.
so out there.
The shroom eating tripper who's like out in the wilderness and dreaming, you know,
talking to bees.
Yeah.
Thomas, you did bring up your character a little bit. Elijah is one of the more complex or maybe controversial even characters in the series. I found myself rooting for him time and time again, but do you maybe personally agree, or did you see that coming with his choices of involving the pistols and the enemy? Because for the viewer, myself, I was watching, and you understand that for survival, you want him to personally have a gain, but then overall, the detrimental kind of decline that might cause for the future for the French and some of the Englishmen.
I could really only use a swear word to describe Elisha Cook. Pick any number.
He's all right.
I mean, he's a unconscionable individual, despite all his poetry and that sort of stuff. But it's interesting, you know, like I've worked with Elwood before, and I enjoy the way that Elwood approaches character. I think we both enjoy the way that one another approaches these things, and always, always being able to enjoy the kind of almost blackly comic sides of the thing that you're dealing with. But, you know, in terms of the raw gambling quality of him as an individual, I'm not sure I understood it until I watched Uncut Gems, the Safdie brothers film with Adam.
It was so good. Love that.
Like, oh my God, he's Howie Bling. Elisha Cook is just Howie Bling. He's like a guy who cannot stop gambling. He will gamble, and even when you point a gun in his face, he's still all he has is that will to continue to gamble. And it's extraordinary what an effective personality type that can be, but just how kind of sociopathic that is as well. I think you see it in the current American president. It's a very particular archetype, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. That's a really good way to put it, gambling. Okay, I have a question for James. So from the very beginning of the series, you can see Charles doesn't want to work. He's having a hard time adjusting. He says he's not cut out for it. We see him progress drastically through the series, but it really does show that humans are kind of self-serving and have a way to kind of justify their actions. What parts of him did you kind of rationalize or align with, even though he may have not have been as morally sound as some of the other characters like Renee?
What did I rationalize?
What parts of him could you kind of agree with or see yourself in his story? Because I think he's one of the characters that was harder to really root for, maybe.
Oh, all of him. I completely root for him. Was it he? He came from nothing, and he's. For him, just the ends justify the means. So he, whatever he's got to do to get to the end of the hour or the end of the day, that's what he's got to do. And so that, I don't know, that was very much how I saw it when I sort of dug around a bit in the novel and dug around a bit in sort of looking at life in Paris and sort of mid 17th century life in Paris for most people. He would have been. I kind of sketched out a bit of a backstory for him, that he would have been an orphan. In the sort of late 1640s, the surrounding countryside, sort of around Paris, the crops failed repeatedly year on year, and people were just dying of starvation. And a lot of people from the countryside came into Paris desperate for food and work. So I sort of had this idea that Duquet's mother would have brought him in, and she probably would have perished, but would have left him kind of in some of the emerging poor relief institutions that were kind of beginning to start up in the sort of 1550s, 1650s.
Yeah, that's very interesting insight. I kind of wondering, from the beginning, I was like, why is he here if he doesn't want to work? But you kind of do see that he is just struggling to exist, and especially with the struggles he had with his tooth and everything else. But I wanted to ask you, Dio, I was cheering for Marie the entire time I was watching. It really shows how far women have come since this time period. Why do you feel like it was important to take on this role in terms of women empowerment and showing that even though despite the lack of rights she may have had, she still was a very headstrong and powerful woman for the position she was in?
I mean, I'm attracted to strong female characters. Those are fun, a lot more fun to play, in my opinion, for myself at least. And I think that everybody sort of had to be strong in their own way in this time. And even the Filles du Roi, they are, to be admired as well, to come to take that crazy journey into the unknown, basically. And my character didn't really have that, but she every single day was just sort of another, as like everybody else in the show, just another day trying to survive. And her survival, because of whatever her circumstances were, depended a lot on Claude Trepagny and depended on her relationship with him. And they actually did, it was important for me and David we discussed, like, these people enjoy each other's company. They actually do really like each other. And it is actually, they enjoy being around each other. And so the journey that their relationship takes, there is, heartbreak, and there is, letting go and doing what she has to do basically for her own survival in the end. And I just, it was really fun to play, and it was really fun to discover her arc as we went through as we were shooting, but also to be working with people like Christian and like David Thewlis, and actually have the chance to talk about our relationships with each other.
Christian, Renee seems to be one of the more, I guess, as just the audience, one of the more morally sound characters, or maybe level-headed. He just wants to be hardworking to try to earn something for himself. Who do you think, or do you think there will come a time where he might have to be more selfish or corrupt to get what he wants? Do you trust that he will be able to get his land and live out what we see in the first few episodes that he wants?
No. I think he is being selfish in that what he's doing is living by his own sort of code, or his own, he's following his own heart in terms of what he thinks is the right thing to do and what he wants for himself. So that inherently is a selfish thing. It just so happens to not really infringe in any hostile way on other people. In that way he's not sort of defeating other people. He's not getting in. He's not sort of harming other people. He's just sort of diligently going about his task in order to sort of create this utopia for himself, or what he thinks is going to be just this idyllic way of living, or this sort of pure, fruitful existence. It's something, he's come from poverty, and you know, come all the way from France and in hope of this better life. And so I think for him, yeah, I think he's doing everything he can to make sure that he gets what he wants. Yeah, I think if something gets in the way of that, then it remains to be seen how far he'll sort of bend his moral compass to stay on the path.
I agree with that. And just to wrap it up, guys, what are you hoping that the audience takes away with these themes of nature and, you know, survival, love? What are you guys hoping that they take away from the series?
James, you answer this. You're the guy.
An engagement with the environment and an engagement with the questions around how we live with the world, because it seems to me very much that the headline of the show is about a clash of these two fundamental ways of being, one sort of living against the world and trying to conquer it and conquer each other, and the other trying to live with the earth and as part of the earth. That seems to me to be the heart of what the audience and, you know, everyone who made the show is trying to sort of engage with.
So this series is based on Annie Proulx's 700 plus page novel, which covers over 300 years of time. Had you guys read the book before taking on this role? And once you were casted, did you read the novel to then prepare?
I personally started the novel when I found out that I got the job. I got halfway through it, and then I read some of the scripts and realized how much the scripts were telling a different story from a different perspective and different characters, etc. And it wasn't as general. It was going more into the relationships with these characters and the events that they ensue. So I got halfway through the book and decided that I probably should just stick to the scripts, because the book is so general. It's such a sweeping kind of a story compared to what Elwood Reed wrote.
It was kind of the same for me, if I'm honest. I've done so many book adaptations now, you know, and it's kind of it's very dangerous territory, because reading a book is so different for every different individual. You know, they all take something very different from it, and there's no way you can make the you know, Annie's novel into a series unless you're going to commit to a very, very, very long time. And I did the same type of thing with Zahn. I started reading it as I was reading the first couple of episodes, and I realized that they were very different things. You know, the world exactly the same, brilliant interpretation, wonderful, poetic interpretation, in fact, which I loved. It's what sold me the whole series. But the characters became more interesting in the series than the book for me, because it cut down and got into the people quicker rather than the big mammoth brick of a book.
I do want to ask you, both of your characters are very different. You both work for the Hudson Bay Company, but to me it seems like Hamish has self-interest, very much wants to justify his interests, and I have a hard time kind of rationalizing or aligning with it. But it seems like your character, Zahn, is more like somebody who's working on the surface level, seems like a pretty good guy who's just working almost for maybe a bad company, or is in a strange position. Do you personally, when you look at each of your characters, could you rationalize their actions for the ends to the mean? Or did you kind of say, this morally just doesn't really make sense what they're doing?
Well, I think Yvonne is exactly what you said. I think that he starts off as quite a loyal company man, and he's dedicated to, well, he's a, you know, he's got principles, and he made it decision and a commitment to the Hudson Bay Company, and he was going to see through whatever they wanted him to do. At a certain point, it becomes, immoral for what he's doing, and the show the 8th episode kind of ends in that way, where he doesn't want to be a part of it anymore, and but I think his loyalties are still with Hamish. He does care about Hamish and cares about what happens to Hamish, but he, at the end, pretty much doesn't want anything to do with it anymore.
Yeah, and with that Hamish and the incident with James Cross, that was a really big scene and a big deal, and it kind of showed Yvonne's human side with him with the bloody red hand sitting there, as things are unfolding. For you playing Hamish, could you rationalize what he was doing, or were you just blown away by his actions?
I think it was incredibly complex for him, because I think he originally, when Hamish and Yvonne arrive, at the Woburn town, they have one prerogative, which is get in and get out. They know as soon as they see dead Indians hanging from a tree, shit is going to go down. They know they're incredibly experienced human beings, and they know that things are going to go bad very quickly. So they just need, the thing is, just get in there, get the guy we're looking for, and get out. Don't disturb anyone. Don't try to get involved with anyone. Just get in and get out. And I think what happens with Hamish is that he gets sucked in by seeing too many innocent people being manipulated by the system. And then he starts to think, I guess, possibly he thinks that he can become sort of some private martyr, like some sort of Sherlock Holmes kind of incognito thing that can come in and solve the problem, and still go in and get out, but go in and save or help more people along the way. And I think he gets so preoccupied by all this and sucked into it, he forgets the reason why he's there in the first place. And then, the underlying thing is that he's there because he's going against his company, even though he is trying to follow all the company rules and is the one that is the most OCD about how the company needs to be run. I think ultimately, though, he's there and he needs to do right for his family, and particularly his sister, because his brother-in-law, who is his teacher from the company, Randall Cross, has gone missing. And he knows that if I get that guy back, I can get him out of there, game over, this place, they can deal with themselves. But as the story unfolds, of course, he realizes that he's one person that he's there to save, the one person that he has the utmost respect for, apart from Yvonne, may have done him wrong.
Right.
And as a young man who is incredibly respectful and incredibly loyal, that becomes insulting. That becomes too much to take. So I think he needs to see the answers for himself before he's able to even comprehend leaving this environment. And then as he's there, he sees so many more people get hurt in this environment that he takes the moral decision to stick around to make sure that nobody else gets hurt underneath his watch, even though it's not his watch.
Well, I think time is up for me, but thank you guys so much for sharing a little bit of perspective on each of your characters. It was really incredible to watch your stories unfold. One quick thing before I go, what do you kind of hope to see with the story if it were to continue in a season 2 for each of your characters?
Revenge.
I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to find out the outcome of what happens with Yvonne and Hamish, if they stick together or they go separate ways.
I need you to mend my wounds for me to mend your wounds, so then we can go on.
That's exactly it.
And ride a rainbow together.
There you go. That's exactly it. Well, thank you guys so much. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for talking with me.
Thank you.